John Donaldson, a baseball lifer. So he started off in northern central Missouri in Glasgow. 1891, he was the oldest of five. He had a sister Tina, brothers James, Odell, Russell, and he at the time had to win baseball over in his life. His mom was not a big fan of him playing baseball because they played on Sundays and Saturday, and in order for him to continue to play, he had to do well. So one day she actually experienced it. She went to the game. She seen the crowd, gave him much cheer, and she thought maybe this is what God's blessing was. Maybe for not him to be a preacher, but maybe be a baseball player. So immediately from there, he played early on throughout his life. This is a picture of him actually in his college, with his college team, excuse me. This is actually the only picture around this time you could find of him. Could not find anything from high school or the early Vanica Blues that he played for from 1908 through 1911. Professional career started off with the Tennessee Rats. First of his 14 no-hitters that, according to the John Donaldson Network and Pete Gordon, he had a record of 41-3. His arsenal of pitches were fastball, that was a blazing fastball, a changeup, curveball, and a slider. Many people believe he is one of the first pitchers to actually master that pitch and consistently throw that pitch to get outs and many strikeouts. From there, this is where John Donaldson kind of takes off. The All Nations, headed by J.L. Wilkinson from 1912 1918. He recorded throughout that time 7 no-hitters. He had 3 straight seasons of 500 strikeouts. Donaldson was now known as the best color pitcher in the world. And as the year went on, he just started to become the best pitcher in the world, regardless of color. As you see here, this is the All Nations team and their Pullman Porter car that was their way of travel. And here's some more statistics. This is a no-hitter from 1914 and a clip of a newspaper saying that he is the best pitcher, color pitcher in the world at the time. As you see in the box score, as you can see, given to us by the John Donaldson Network, there were no hits in that game. He had 16 strikeouts as well. Something that I thought was very interesting about John Donaldson as well, he was the model athlete for his generation. The Smelter Arms company made him the premier athlete, so he was advertised. He has some of his own signature gloves and things. This is very similar to what we will see in an athlete today, like Mookie Betts being sponsored by a Jordan company. But Donaldson did it 100 years later. I'm sorry, earlier. From there, with him playing with the All Nations team, he still was playing with other ball clubs. And I think this is where people really need to understand how much John Donaldson was pitching before 1920. So still playing with the All Nations from 1912, 1918. He was also playing for the Kansas City Colts, the Ponciana Hotel League, the Los Angeles White Sox, the Indianapolis ABCs, and the Brooklyn Royal Giants. In 1919, from what I've only researched, he only played for the Detroit Stars and the Chicago American Giants for just a little bit. Then he went to Kansas City for the Monarchs. This was his first stint from 1920 1923. This was Donaldson's really coming out in the professional league, in the Negro National League at the time. J.L. Wilkinson will say 30 years later that Donaldson was the best. When asked about him, he shared that it was also John Donaldson who came up with the name Monarchs for that club. And something I want to point out as well, he played 180 games, 1920, 1921, but in 1922 to 1923, just those 33 games. One thing that J.L. Wilkinson one thing J.L. Wilkinson and John Donaldson agreed upon was that barnstorming was their game. They made lots of funds, and they got the notoriety that put John Donaldson in a different light. As we see the pictures here of him being in the Monarchs uniform, we see Hurley McNair, Jose Mendez, and Bullet Rogan, and then the great picture up top here of John Donaldson being a pitcher, center fielder, pinch hitter, pretty much everything that the Kansas City Monarchs needed at the time. And here's another article talking about John Donaldson J.L. Wilkinson quoting that Donaldson was the best player at the time for the Monarchs. And when it was the All Nations team, he was definitely the best there as well. John Donaldson then, during the same time with the Monarchs, had his own All Nations team. Some people call it the Donaldson All-Stars. That's actually not the truth. This was the Donaldson All Nations team. So again, 1920 to 1923, he's playing on 2 ball clubs and he's pitching quite often. So in 1924, believe it or not, after playing only 2 games, Donaldson wants to go back to barnstorming. This was his success. This is what got him to the status of where he's at. And he seemed fit to just, after 2 games, go back to barnstorming. Where he went to Bertha shortly. And Bertha, believe it or not, saved up 3 months ahead to make sure that they could secure Donaldson for that time. And he was 21-3 throughout that year. From there, he went to Lismore. They paid him $450 as well, plus a house. So John Donaldson was really highly favored in most of the northern Midwest states, with Lismore being an example. Okay, so here we go again. He played for a lot of teams. So more clubs he played for immediately after that, as we see here, throughout Minnesota, Minnesota, Canada, just lots of different places, Chicago. I mean, Donaldson was pitching pretty much everywhere he can because of the crowd and his success, which I'm going to talk about later. His stats are very incredible. So from there, you get John Donaldson All-Stars. This is the team that I believe inspired Satchel Paige, later in his career to have his own All-Star team as well. Played for the Monarchs again in 1934 season. This was his last stint with the Monarchs ever. And I believe this probably was one of the greatest Monarchs team as well. We see Turkey Stearns here in the middle, Frank Duncan in the front, Frank Duncan Jr. And this was Donaldson's last go-around with the Monarchs. From there, he played for Satchel Paige All-Stars, which I think started the relationship of something really special. Satchel had hurt his arm, and he was in recovery, and John Donaldson actually became his travel agent on his road to recovery. So most of the towns that John Donaldson pitched in, which is over 744, Satchel Paige really followed suit. A few years later, he retired in 1942 at the age of 51, but though his last appearance in the game was at the age of 57. And this propelled him to a status of him being the first Black scout. So John Donaldson's life at this point has come full circle. He, of course, was older and couldn't be in the major leagues after the color barrier was broken, but he did have some influence on some players. Sam Hairston, who he signed for the Chicago White Sox. And that signing will bring a 3-generation empire, much like the Bankheads and Taylors of the Negro National League, Negro American League, Eastern Color League before. And here's a picture actually of his card, his business card here when he was working for the Chicago White Sox. And this is the Hairston family that, had 4 generations of players. And this would never have happened if it wasn't for John Donaldson. Another player he scouted successfully was Bob Boyd, who had a short tenure with the White Sox, but he had a great season with the Baltimore Orioles, and he is still the only player ever to turn an unassisted triple play in opening day. Willie Mays and also Ernie Banks were scouted, but he was unsuccessful in that, and that actually drove him out of that scouting role in 1955, quoted saying that because the White Sox couldn't assess talent, he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. Okay, so all of that, all of his life, all of these teams. In 1952, he was part of the Pittsburgh Courier All Negro League team, and this was the Centennial Pitchers, as we see him in the middle. All of these players, besides Mr. Donaldson, is not in the Hall of Fame. And as we know, his influence with the Kansas City Monarchs, with Satchel Paige, reviving his career after the arm injury, is very, very not really appreciated, I believe, because Satchel, if you really look at the way he conducted his business, the towns he went to, Donaldson had been there before. kind of showing him the ropes. So his career as a baseball lifer, and these are all the numbers that I've gathered from the Donaldson Network. Mr. Pete Gordon, 428 verified wins. So again, it's the time before baseball in the Black community was actually a league. So from 1908 through 1920, he's playing anywhere he can for as many teams as he can. Strikeouts, over 5,295. It's quite a lot, right? Finalist for the Baseball Hall of Fame 2 times. He had 30 consecutive no-hit innings. Something very important as well, in 1913, he actually pitched 3 consecutive no-hitters. He's a member of the Missouri Hall of Fame. Again, played in over 700 cities, including Canada. 14 no-hitters and 2 perfect games in total. And again, he mentored a lot of players, Satchel Paige being the most prominent one. He was the first scout again in MLB history. And as we can see here, the other accolades that he conducted over his career. Now, this is something I think is very, very valuable. There is footage of John Donaldson hitting and pitching. It's only going to take about 30 seconds. Here we go. Let's go back there. Can we play this? So this is him batting. And Donaldson also, it's not showing, is it? Let's see here. How would that do? I'm sorry about that. Hopefully we can see that at another time. But this is actually on YouTube as well. John Donaldson played the field as well. He played center field when the days he was not pitching. He was a great athlete as well. I really wish we could show the footage, but at a later time, I guess we'll show that. Okay. And lastly, I want to show my references, which was Mr. Pete Gordon, who pretty much revitalized John Donaldson's name in his career. He dug up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of box scores and newspaper articles, and that created the John Donaldson Network. Mr. Phil Dixon has done a lot of interviews where I got a lot of my information from as well. Mr. Brian Flasformer.
Quick math. The less your business spends on infrastructure, the more margin you keep.
Okay. All right. And the other resources of John Donaldson, Brave Host, and his SABR bio.
NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform with one.
Yeah. All right. So overall, John Donaldson's career should be looked at as a baseball lifer, much like Buck O'Neil. He later in his life became an executive. He again started a type of baseball that inspired Satchel Paige to be who he was. And I think that's very important. And overall, I believe his numbers, people like to say he wasn't playing against the best competition, but if our country was actually open to having the best people play together, that would never have been a question in itself. So thank you.